Hi my friends, I'm so glad to have you here with me today. My name is Misty Sims, and if you found me, then you found my little corner of the internet that I like to call Beyond Reasonable Doubt, where we talk about all things true crime, culty, and a little creepy. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking that link, and I do hope that you will click that subscribe button and the notification bell and hang out with me long term. And if you're a returning subscriber, you already know that I love you more than cupcakes with sprinkles. And guys, I had a goal set for myself in 2024 to hit 1,000 views on a video in a week, and that already happened with Georgia Tan, and that's only because of y'all. So thank you guys so much for all you do for me and this channel. Now for today's case. So Thanksgiving is a day where I tend to spend going absolutely crazy, cooking and baking up a storm and just enjoying time off with my family. But sadly for our victim in today's case, this would be a day of drawing her last breaths after she fell victim to the violent hands of someone who was supposed to love, honor, and cherish her. Today we will be discussing the brutal death of Ashley Scott and how many people think the jury got this one wrong in their verdict. This is a heavy one, y'all, so let's dive right in. Jeffrey and Ashley Scott resided in an area still considered to be a part of Memphis, Tennessee, which most people are going to know for blues music and Graceland, which is the home of the late Elvis Presley. And while Beale Street bustles with sounds of blues music, bars, restaurants, Memphis has seen its fair share of struggles, as we discussed in the Georgia Tan case. But nevertheless, the Memphis and the surrounding areas that we know today held and still hold opportunities for young couples like the Scotts. And the Scotts were what we would probably call working middle class, with Jeffrey working at his father's tech firm and Ashley working as a high school teacher at Bolton High School in Arlington, Tennessee, which is just a short commute from Memphis and still in the same county, Shelby County. At the time of her death, Ashley was 28 years old, and students and the faculty of the high school absolutely loved her. Now, she was born on November 4th, 1978, in Bossier City, Louisiana, to Maya and Dennis Youngblood. Well, sadly, that marriage wouldn't last, but her mother would meet and marry Jimmy Wayne Pittman, who actually adopted Ashley when she was still in kindergarten. And Ashley had what was described as a happy childhood and would graduate high school in 1996. Ashley's best friend described her as beautiful, loving people, and being just absolutely hilariously funny. She graduated with her teaching degree in the year 2000 from a college in Arkansas, and that's also where she met Jeffrey Scott. And it was said since the very beginning the two had just been inseparable, and no one really saw any reason for concern or worry over the relationship in the beginning. But soon the couple would move to Cordova, Tennessee, which is still in Shelby County right outside of Memphis. And here Ashley would marry Jeffrey, but none of her friends and family were invited. And everybody started to worry about it at this point, and this was kind of the icing on the cake for their concern. They said Jeffrey had become just very, very hateful and made a lot of self-deprecating remarks and kept just a close hold on Ashley, having to always know where she was at all times. And the family and friends absolutely described it as obsessive. They said that he was open about not liking any of them, and he had begun just isolating her and pulling her away from them. And even though with this going on in her personal life, Ashley was still able to get her first job teaching in 2003 at Collierville High School as a student teacher underneath Elizabeth Scism. Now, Elizabeth would go on to write and publish an essay about Ashley called Drop Dead Gorgeous in Memphis magazine, and I'll link it below, but it is a very sweet tribute to a girl who had no idea she was so beautiful, charming, or witty. And she was, and all the students were just enamored with her, but they were learning all at the same time. Elizabeth described Ashley's rhinestone flip-flops, a dinosaur foot eraser sticking out of her twisted up hair, and almost cussing in front of the class, and I just felt an immediate connection to Ashley because you rarely find me without the same rhinestone flip-flops and crazy trinkets and pins and sometimes colorful language of my own, but I'd say Ashley's friends just describing her as a friend to everyone was accurate, when even after her death, I found something that could connect me to her and be so endearing. She said that Ashley never felt as at home as she did in the classroom, but Ashley was very alone because if you recall, Jeff had cut her off from all of her family and friends, and this is pretty typical of an abuser. They want control over their victims, and it's really hard to maintain control over somebody if they have friends and support and just people around them that care about them. So it's best to just sever all those ties. And Jeff was mastering this. And sadly, he would execute one final act that took total control away from Ashley and would also take her from her friends and family permanently. On Thanksgiving Day 2006, the Memphis, Tennessee police dispatcher Paula Haygood would receive a call from a man named Jeffrey Scott. She would provide testimony later that she said she reported a possible homicide to her supervisor because while Jeffrey was calmly saying that his wife had fallen unconscious but was still breathing, she could hear audibly a man in the background saying, "No, man, she isn't breathing. She's dead." And that just didn't quite sit right with her. Memphis police officer Sloan Liddell would be the first one that was on the scene to the Scott's home. And when he went into the bedroom, he found a man named Dr. Robert McGee giving CPR to a victim on the floor. And that's whose voice Paula had heard in the background, and he was also a good friend of Jeffrey Scott's. Jeffrey had called him and asked him to come and check on Ashley because he was concerned about her, air quotes there. The doctor was really hesitant to come. It was a holiday after all, but he decided to go, and he asked if the Scotts had been drinking, and when Jeff said yes, Dr. McGee would later testify that he didn't really hear a lot of concern in his voice, but he did say Jeff asked him to come alone, and he thought that this was probably a better idea anyway if the Scotts had been drinking and it was a volatile situation. He didn't want his family to be around all that, so he arrived about an hour later because he took his family home and dropped them off. When he got to the Scott's home, he has said that he felt bad that he hadn't hurried right over because he could tell Ashley was in a very bad way and likely already gone or dying. So he told Jeff, call 911 immediately. Get on the phone, call them now. Officer Liddell would say when he saw Ashley, he could tell that she was very badly beaten. So he detained Jeff in his police car. And Jeff told him that he had become very upset over a text message on Ashley's phone. The officer observed her purse, her phone, and her passport were in the kitchen. There was a printed hard copy of an email lying beside their laptop. And then in the garage, the officers would testify that there were two cars, Jeff's Jeep and Ashley's Volkswagen Beetle. And inside Ashley's car, there were her clothes just thrown in the back, still on hangers. And then beside the car, there was a pillow and a blanket and what appeared to be bloodstains right next to the pillow and the blanket. And Gary Garman was the first medical responder on the scene and saw that Ashley had blunt force trauma to her head. And then as he further examined, he noted that she had injuries to her chest, her legs, and her back. She had no pulse or blood pressure, and her pupils were extremely dilated. And he said that she had bruising behind her ears, which is consistent with a severe head trauma, and she also had bloody vomit coming from her mouth and her nose. He also noticed that she had cauliflower ear, which is typically associated with boxers and MMA fighters who just take repeated blows to the side of their head and their ears. And it's a pretty gnarly injury if you've never seen it. And in my opinion, it looks like it would be painful, or at least painful to get. And he also noted that she had a large bruise on her back, and it seemed to be a shoe print. So he used a defibrillator, tried to shock her 4 times, along with some medication to attempt to restart her heart. He also intubated her and attempted CPR while they transported her to a local hospital. The ER doctor at the hospital confirmed what the first responders had seen and also felt that she had been severely beaten. And with the various colorings and the healings of some of the injuries and the bruises, it was consistent with a pattern of abuse. So some of these were actually healing and not fresh. And he also agreed that the bruise on her back looked like that of a shoe print. A second doctor was called in who specialized in critical care and would also concur with these findings and would later testify that on first sight, Ashley, she did look like she had been beaten to death. And he did find old injuries as well. A neurosurgeon found that she was brain dead and in the 3rd stages of shock, and she passed almost immediately after being taken off of life support. The autopsy would show that there were more than 50 bruises and injuries all over her body. And the cause of her death was a hematoma to the side of her head, which caused severe swelling to her brain and hemorrhaging, and her body just shut down. The left side of her head was hit so hard, her brain crashed into the right side. And I'm no medical expert, but that sounds like a heck of a hit. And then as bad as all that sounds, the medical team would agree that their belief was that she could have lived had she been given a medical treatment immediately. And it would later be discovered Jeffrey waited 13 hours before he sought the help of his friend. 13 hours, y'all. I mean, he said he was concerned about her. So I'm not sure what not being concerned would have looked like. Forgive the sarcasm. But I think we can all agree that he probably wasn't concerned. Needless to say, after all these findings, it was probably easy to arrest Jeffrey, and he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He claimed they had an argument, and he forced her to sleep in the garage, trying to explain why the pillow and blanket was out there. And he said he went back to their room to go to bed. But the truth was, he had left her beaten and bruised and to die on that cold garage floor. If you don't know much about Memphis or anything of Tennessee, well, I'm from Tennessee. While we aren't typically brave in snowstorms like the North usually does, it still does get cold here. And that concrete around November, late November, would have been bitterly cold. And I've walked on cold concrete, I'll get it out, with no shoes on, and it's almost painful. So this was just despicable. In January of 2009, Jeffrey's trial began, and it would last 8 days. Ashley's best friend and one of the few people who still had contact with her, Lori Machen, would testify that in November of 2005, Jeffrey would start calling Lori to complain about Ashley and her drinking. He said that she was drinking so much that she was falling and hurting herself, and that she wouldn't remember it the next day. And he would go on to say he didn't like a friend of Ashley's named Blair Brown. And how much time like Blair and Ashley were spending together. He felt that Blair was a bad influence on Ashley. And he told Lori that he just no longer even wanted Ashley to be the mother of his children, even though they had talked about expanding their family, because Ashley was having multiple affairs. So why would Jeff need to call Ashley's best friend to just go over these things, other than to try to get it in her head and turn her from Ashley as well? Well, Lori was equally as shocked as I was to hear that. She was shocked by receiving these phone calls. And she kept calling Ashley over and over, trying to talk to her, but Ashley wouldn't answer. And Lori finally told Jeff, stop calling me because Ashley is my best friend and I'm going to stand by her. So Jeff called her one final time to say that he and Ashley were now in therapy, and the therapist said that he should leave Lori out of his and Ashley's problems. No joke. And not to call Lori again, and promised her that he wouldn't. Well, after all that stopped, Ashley started taking Lori's phone calls again. And she started telling Lori about how mean Jeff was to her and how he was calling her names like a whore and saying that she was a bad role model to her students. But she would never go quite all in and tell her about the physical abuse piece. Now, Lori knew Ashley drank a lot, but she said that she never addressed that with her because she didn't want to make her feel worse about the whole situation. Ashley was already in a bad place considering everything that she was enduring, and Lori wasn't going to beat her up anymore. It's what friends do, right? We're there for each other. So Ashley would go see Lori in September of 2006 because they were going to go attend their high school reunion together. And Lori said Jeffrey called incessantly and made Ashley even describe the entire outfit down to a finite detail that she was wearing to the reunion. Lori said that she tried to talk to Ashley about her marriage, but Ashley just wanted to have fun and not have to discuss it. Ashley did make a call to a divorce lawyer the week of her death, who she'd been in touch with for more than a year. They were in touch when Ashley was looking for a criminal lawyer for a DUI case that she had received. And when she found out that Rachel Songstad was actually a divorce attorney, she started asking her questions about a friend, quote unquote, who was in an abusive marriage and how this was how their relationship kind of began. Rachel described seeing Ashley with a huge knot on her head, and she told her everything that they said was protected by attorney-client privilege. So when Ashley said, well, that's great, but I can't afford to hire you, Rachel said, give me $1. I think that'll cover it. So Ashley gave her 4 quarters, and she nodded that she was the victim of the abuse, and Rachel told her to leave. And Ashley was afraid. She said Jeff had told her that he would kill her if she ever tried to leave him, and that he'd actually been hitting her since college. So years of this abuse had gone on. Over the next year, Ashley would come and see Rachel in person, or she would call her from a payphone or business phones because Jeff was, of course, checking the phone bill to see who all she was calling. She was even calling her from places like a tanning salon and having Rachel meet her in the parking lot. Well, in that meeting, when Rachel went to meet her, Ashley's chin was all bandaged up, And Ashley told her that when Jeff had hit her, knocked her down, and she'd hit her face on a piece of furniture. So, I mean, just this guy all the time. Rachel would testify that Ashley called her late in the day on November 22nd, so the day before she was murdered, and told her that she finally had that filing fee for divorce, and she was ready. She was ready to go. Well, Rachel was in Nashville, because remember it's holiday time, right? And she couldn't meet with her now, but she told her, go ahead, get out, leave now. Ashley said she needed to go get a few things from the house, and she asked if Rachel thought Ashley should tell Jeff she was leaving. And Rachel said, no, just go now. But Ashley said she felt like she owed him and his family an explanation. Like, her heart, it just breaks mine. Well, based on the clothes in the car, and then police also described like her dog crate being moved, like it looked like it was trying to be moved towards the car or towards the garage, her passport being on the table, and all these things, it appears that she was trying to leave. So, I'm guessing that conversation did take place. Elizabeth Scism would also testify that in 2006, after Ashley had been to that class reunion, Elizabeth went and met Ashley at the new high school where she was working. And Ashley said when she got back home, Jeff told her that he had brought a sex worker to their home while she was gone, and then proceeded to go through her entire suitcase while screaming at her that she had been dressing like nothing but a whore. Well, Ashley responded, well, maybe if I was dressing like one, you wouldn't be having sex workers in the house. And then at that point, Jeff knocked her to the ground and stood on her throat. She begged him to stop because she couldn't breathe, and he just yelled back at her that he didn't want her to breathe. Ashley said she was constantly called names and hit, and she did admit she had a drinking problem and usually didn't remember going to bed. And Elizabeth only admitted to that knowledge of the drinking under cross-examination, I would think probably just to protect her friend. If you weren't directly asked about it, she didn't necessarily offer it up. And I don't blame her in this situation. I'd probably protect my friend too. Another colleague and the department chair at Bolton High School for Ashley's high school, Paul Dooley, would give a testimony, and he described himself as Ashley's mentor and friend, and he knew about the DUI, and he also knew about some of the abuse. She had begun telling him about the emotional and verbal abuse, and then she would start missing work, wearing super heavy makeup and long sleeves to cover bruises, and she would try and laugh it off when people would say something about it, saying she walked into a cabinet. But Paul got even more concerned when she received a phone call from Ashley at 3:15 in the morning on July 6th, and she was crying and saying that Jeff had hit her and strangled her during a fight. He tried to get her to leave, tried to get her to call the police, but she just wouldn't. Two other teachers and the principal at the high school where Ashley worked, they said that they were called to testify. They told similar stories. They said that she was just withdrawn. She was sad. She wouldn't confide in many about her real life, probably because she was embarrassed. She could barely even hide it anymore. Jeff was having numerous affairs, and even though he was obsessive over keeping Ashley, it didn't keep him in the house. He alluded to her having tons of affairs as well, but only one was proven in open court. But one of his affairs was with a woman named Virginia Blair Brown, and she was called to testify during the trial. So you may be thinking, yeah, I've heard that name before. Well, my friends, you have. That's the same Blair Brown that he was telling Lori was a bad influence on Ashley. He had been having a long-term affair with her. She was one of his co-workers at his dad's company, and she had actually started the year before him. And the physical relationship between she and Jeff, it was off and on from about December of 2002 to around the middle of 2005. Now, after the affair, she actually became very good friends with Ashley, according to her own testimony. And Jeff said that he had come clean about the affair to Ashley, but the two still continued a friendship and became very, very close. Ashley would actually go to her house to get away when Jeff would be beating on her or threatening her, and Blair and Ashley would drink heavily together. Blair said that she never witnessed Ashley be enraged at Jeff, but she had seen Jeff attack Ashley. Ashley had come over to Blair's house to get away from him, at which point Jeff barged through the door, and Ashley had been lying on Blair's bed. He went back into that room and punched her 3 times very hard in the back. Blair was able to get him off Ashley and threw him out, but Ashley was insistent that she not call the police. Blair also recalled an instance where Ashley's dog had been thrown out of Jeff's Jeep by Jeff, and Blair met Ashley at the vet's office. The dog lived, but it took it about 2 weeks to recover. And then Blair would also go on to testify that she did know about an affair that Ashley had. They had been at a bar, and they met a man named Michael Lowe, and that is the man that Ashley would soon start an affair with. Blair said that Michael came to her house to meet Ashley, and they would engage in intimate affairs in her guest bedroom. Now, she also testified, and it's pretty crappy, that she actually called Jeff to tell him what was going on. Now, she claims that she thought Ashley was only using her, so, I guess she was getting back at her. But, this chick's a great person to have in your life, right? Clearly. Like, sorry, Blair, not being mean, not being ugly, because we all make mistakes. But if you know her husband is an abuser like that, and you stir him up on purpose, that makes you a ditch cat. So, and no, nobody should be having an affair. Don't do that. Leave somebody if you don't want to be with them. But don't ever purposely endanger someone like that. Not cool, Blair. But thankfully, Blair, one thing to be thankful of is that you did provide the testimony that would prove the violence, and then also introduce Michael Lowe. Because when Michael Lowe was called to the stand, while he minimized the affair he was having with Ashley, he said it wasn't a full-blown affair. It was just like 4, quick physical encounters. Ashley's phone was subpoenaed because of this. And now technology back then wasn't great, so you couldn't transcribe all the texts, but you could see the number that the texts were going to, and you could see the type. So multimedia texts were assumed to be pictures. And most of the texts that were sent between October 29th of 2006 up until her death on November 22nd, 2006 were between she and Michael. Now, a sheriff's deputy would testify that he did go through Ashley's phone, and he found 5 pictures of female private areas on her phone, and they assumed that these were the pictures, and that was the text that Jeffrey said that they fought over. Now, Ashley's gynecologist would give testimony that he saw her on November 14th, and she was there to get medicine to increase her ovulation because she and Jeffrey were trying to be serious about expanding their family. So it doesn't really appear that at that point that she had long-term plans of leaving Jeff. A local realtor would also testify that she would state that Ashley and Jeffrey had just bought a new home. They actually signed the paperwork on November 14th. And Blair Brown's testimony confirmed this, saying that the day before Ashley's death, that she had taken Blair to see the new house, and they went to lunch where, Ashley was having some wine, she was in good spirits, and she was telling her about being excited about the home and trying for a baby. So, all this doesn't sound like she's trying to leave, but the defense tried to paint a picture of just a hurt husband who was desperately trying to keep his family together. They pulled portions of that printed email into the mix and read it, and I'm summing this up in my own words, but it basically was where Ashley was asking her biological dad for money and help budgeting, and stating that she wouldn't let Jeffrey put her on a budget, but she'd let her dad. And they really attempted to cast Ashley in a bad light through this, and then Michael Lowe's testimony of the affair. They're saying she's basically an irresponsible cheater who won't get on a plan with Jeffrey about money. And of course, I would also be worried to think that she wasn't, she was worried about being financially controlled by Jeffrey. Who knows? But her character was definitely put on trial, and the defense team was great at painting pictures to question things about Ashley, like could she have been suffering from issues due to her alcoholism that was making her pass out and fall down and hurt herself. But this was quickly refuted by the autopsy results, but it still had, I guess, an impact on the jury because they came back with a guilty verdict, but it was murder in the second, not murder in the first. And even the judge was critical and basically, told Jeff, hey, you could have called for help and you didn't. And this jury just gave you the break of a lifetime. So Ashley's friends and family and students were just torn up by this verdict. They have grieved her ever since. The school's prom that following year, the theme was pink, which was her favorite color, to honor her. And Paul Dooley organizes a 5K every year in her honor and gives the money to victims of DV in the area. Ashley's story is one that absolutely breaks my heart. We will never know for sure exactly what happened that night, but based on that printed email and Jeffrey saying that they fought over a text, it makes me believe that Ashley was having to run and try to get away from his anger. And that's just my guess based on how her clothes were kind of thrown into the car. I mean, she seemed to want a family and the trips to the doctor and the new house. And I know she was seeing Michael Lowe, and that coupled with the drinking, I think, my opinion, she was filling some voids and kind of self-medicating. She was alone, she's troubled, she's starving for a kind word or a hand. And that doesn't make the affairs of the heavy drinking like this okay, or the answer. But I think I could see how she felt like that was her only option or a safe place. She didn't call the police for whatever reason, probably because she wanted to protect him. She loved him. But she can still help others today. If you are the victim of DV, do not let Ashley's story be your story. Let her voice be heard now and call somebody for help. Look for local shelters if you don't have anywhere to go. Listen to me when I say these words. You do not deserve this treatment. You are loved and you are worthy of a happy and amazing life. Get out now and get help. We need you in this world, regardless of what you were being told or made to feel. And let's do something special for Ashley, who sounds like just an absolutely delight and gifted teacher. Every time you see Pink, smile and hug somebody. She didn't get those hugs, but it sounds like she left a very large imprint on her students that will never be forgotten. And for that, our world is just a little bit brighter. Whew, all right, that was a lot. All right, my friends, that's it for me today. But I want to remind you that I love you, and I want you to stay safe out there and stay sweet, my cupcakes. And I will see you next time. Bye!